The morning sunlight had barely crept over the low hills of Montecito when Isla Redgrave walked into her kitchen, the marble floor still cold beneath her bare feet. She moved with the ease of someone used to silence, pouring water into the kettle and setting it on the stove without a word. The house around her was hushed, too quiet, even for her liking. Thomas Alden had flown to New York the night before. He hadn't left a note, but she knew his schedule by heart. His charity gala, his private dinner with the military board, his unspoken attempt at avoiding any overlap with the extended royal circle that still lingered on the East Coast. Isla checked her phone and found the Bagna notification waiting, thousands of likes and messages flooding in after her late-night thank you. Post for as ever. The launch of their new herbal balm had exceeded all projections, and the comments under her photo were filled with warmth. She had posed in her garden, barefoot, fingers gently brushing across a bed of lavender. It looked effortless. It always did. She had written only a few words, a thank you, and something about softness, about finding quiet within noise. Even as the world clapped and echoed her grace, she knew what they were really watching. They were watching what she didn't do, what she didn't say. She walked through the open glass doors to the back patio, sipping her tea slowly as she scrolled through the morning press. The tabloids were already spinning stories about Thomas's solo appearance in Manhattan. One article asked why she hadn't joined him. Another speculated if this was her subtle way of sidestepping proximity to the crown, whose members were expected to attend. None of it surprised her. But still, the implication cut deeper than usual. Her assistant, Jules, entered the room carefully, holding a stack of documents. Isla didn't look up. She asked for an updated report on product feedback and requested that the press statements stay neutral. No commentary on Thomas, no engagement with the royal speculation. She wanted the conversation pulled back to the balm, to the fans, to the idea of healing. And then she stood, placed her tea on the counter, and quietly disappeared into the hallway, the kind of exit that didn't make a sound, but somehow left the entire house humming with tension. Outside, the wind stirred the garden. Inside, the silence stretched. Thomas Alden stepped out of the black SUV as flashes from cameras briefly lit up the evening air outside the Midtown ballroom. He kept his gaze steady, chin slightly lifted, his posture that of someone used to absorbing attention without reacting to it. His longtime advisor, Benedict Rain, moved beside him with clipped efficiency, giving short nods to the waiting press. Thomas didn't pause. He buttoned his coat slowly, then moved up the stone steps, one deliberate motion after another, never once looking over his shoulder. Inside the gala, the atmosphere was rich with opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet-lined corridors, murmured greetings from men in medals and tailored tuxedos. Thomas shook hands, offered smiles, posed for a photograph next to the charity's founder. His voice stayed measured. His expression didn't flicker, not even when one of the guests leaned in to ask if Isla was arriving later. He answered simply, and then he did what he always did. He pivoted, politely, gracefully, without hesitation. Later, as the crowd eased into seated dinner, Thomas excused himself and slipped away to a quieter lounge upstairs. Benedict followed a few moments later, carrying a folder filled with updates and media scans. He placed it on the small table beside a half-finished drink, then handed Thomas his phone. Already open to the article he didn't want to read. Thomas took the phone, scanned the headline. "Where's Isla?" Fans wonder why she's absent while Thomas shines solo, and then he handed it back without reacting. He didn't speak for a long time. Instead, he walked over to the window, rested his palm against the frame, and looked out at the city. Lights beyond. They moved endlessly, small and bright and indifferent. He remembered their conversation before he left. It had been quiet, borderline rehearsed. He had asked if she might come with him. She had tilted her head, half smiling, and then she had told him it was better this way, that he should have the space to shine, uninterrupted. He had nodded. But deep down, he hadn't believed that was her full reason. As he stood there, still in his tuxedo, the applause from the main hall rose beneath the floorboards like muffled thunder. He didn't return immediately. Instead, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a photo that had been mailed to him weeks ago. An old image of them both on a rainy afternoon in Scotland, back when things still felt like discovery. He looked at it for a long time, then tucked it away again, smoothing his jacket and walking slowly back into the crowd, into the noise, into the eyes of those waiting for him to speak. All while the one voice he missed most remained, 3,000 miles away and growing quieter with each step. The Montecito air had turned cooler by evening, a faint salt wind trailing in from the ocean as Isla Redgrave stood beneath the hanging. Jasmine vines in her courtyard, arms crossed, head tilted toward the fading light. The house behind her was quiet again, the kind of quiet that used to soothe her but now seemed to press in too heavily. She had spent the day in back-to-back meetings, design, revisions, packaging debates, press coordination, but none of it had truly occupied her. Earlier, she had asked Jules to cancel her media briefing for the new As Ever sleep oil. She claimed exhaustion, but in truth, she couldn't bear to answer the inevitable questions about her absence from New York. Not again. She had grown used to the way questions arrived dressed as compliments. You're so grounded now, aren't you? So centered? But they always circled back to the same point. Why weren't you there? She moved back inside and climbed the stairs to her study. The scent of cedar still clung to the fabric of the armchair near the window, where she often sat and wrote longhand letters she never sent. She picked up her pen, opened a fresh journal page, and began to write slowly, reflectively. Not a letter, not exactly. Just thoughts. She wrote about distance and appearance, about how love sometimes becomes performance, about the exhaustion of having to constantly frame your own silence so it wouldn't be framed by someone else. She paused only once to glance. At her phone buzzing in the corner, a message from Thomas. Just a photo. He had sent her a shot of the ballroom taken from his table. No words, no caption. She stared at it for a moment, then placed the phone face down on the desk. In New York, Thomas sat at that very table, watching the stage while someone gave a heartfelt speech about resilience and partnership. He applauded. At the right moments, nodded where expected, but his mind kept drifting. He remembered Isla's hands, how she would rub the bridge of her nose when unsure of something. He wondered if she was doing that now. He wondered if she had seen the photo. After the event, he returned to his hotel and stood by the window in his shirt sleeves, watching the taxis glide by like insects on glass. He thought of calling her. Then he didn't. Instead, he turned off the lights, lay down on the bed, and stared at the dark ceiling while the soft vibration of his phone, unread and unanswered, hummed gently beside him. Thomas Alden stepped off. The plane in California just after noon, the sun sharp and unforgiving as it bounced off the tarmac. He wore dark sunglasses, his jaw tight, his coat folded neatly over one arm. Benedict Rain walked several paces behind him, already coordinating the logistics of the upcoming veterans event. Thomas answered only when necessary, his voice low, distracted. The flight had been quiet. He hadn't slept. He had spent most of it rereading the message he never sent to Isla. He was driven straight to the Montecito estate, the same road he had traveled countless times before, but today it felt longer, more distant. As the SUV pulled into the circular drive, he noticed the garden had been trimmed since he left. The olive trees stood taller, the roses clipped back neatly. Everything was in place, just as she kept it. He stepped inside without knocking, the familiar scent of jasmine and candle wax meeting him like memory. There were no footsteps, no voices. He placed his coat gently on the nearest chair and moved through the house until he reached the back veranda. Isla sat there already, a linen blanket draped across her lap, a book in her hand that she wasn't reading. She looked up when he approached, her face calm, unreadable. He greeted her, and then he sat across from her. The silence between them was heavy, not hostile, but layered. He asked if she had seen the speech. She said she had. Then she asked if he had read the essay she published 2 days ago, the one about private quiet being louder than public appearances. He nodded. They didn't speak of the photos. Not his from the gala, not hers from the garden. Instead, he reached for the teacup on the table. Hers, not his, and held it carefully before setting it down again. Then he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He looked her fully in the eye and asked if she was tired. She said she was. Then she asked if he was lonely. He didn't answer right away, but she didn't push. They sat that way until the sun slipped low behind the hills, casting long golden shadows over the terrace tiles. He leaned back, eyes closed, while she turned the page of the book she hadn't yet read. There was no apology, no sudden burst of honesty, only presence. A kind of quiet, breathing truce between two people who had run out of places to escape to, and for now that was enough.